All right, happy Monday, everybody. Again, if you didn't check in with us last week, as I introduced myself, I just want to let everyone know again, I'm Keithan. I am a member of the Never Alone Recovery Team, and I'll be checking in on Mondays with the live video just to provide some insight, information, education, and or experience on given topics that we think are important to discuss in dealing with those suffering or struggling with addiction. And so today we'll be covering the topic of overdose. And it is one topic that just like addiction in itself, it's one topic that I believe many of us are impacted by. But I just want to shed some new light on overdose itself. Uh, more current times when we hear the term overdose, it is most of the time directly connected to opiate use, heroin, fentanyl, the opiate pain medications, and so it's always connected to that class of substances in most cases when there's a discussion about overdose. And the other connection that's all too common and happens too often is the fatality as a result of an overdose. And so, what I believe is, yes, that part is the part that opens the eyes and gives attention to drug use, addiction, and just that arena. But the reality is an overdose is more than just what takes place as a result of overuse of fentanyl or heroin or the pain medications, right? So anytime I go to my doctor and my doctor prescribes me something, my children were just sick recently and they got cough medicine. And when they went to the doctor prescribed an antibiotic and then this cough medicine. Now, the antibiotic was prescribed to be taken once in the morning and once before bed. The cough medicine, on the other hand, was to be taken 4 times a day, PRN, or as needed, right? And so that's the way I gave that medication to my children, 4 times a day, as needed. So as the cough began to decrease, then it's no longer 4 times a day because they don't need it 4 times a day. But if I were to give my children this cough medication 6 times in a day, then that's an overdose. I've overdosed them on the medication that they were given to help them overcome their sickness, right? And so that's another way to look at the overdose. When it comes to alcohol use, anytime I consume alcohol in such a large amount that I have to vomit, that's an overdose because my body is rejecting this thing that I'm consuming. It's rejecting these toxins, right? And so I just want to shed that light on overdose before I go any further, because again, more often today, overdose is only connected to fentanyl and heroin and then intravenous IV use of it. But that's just not the only place that an overdose can happen, right? And so, unfortunately, society has put substances in these different classifications, right? Whereas there's the good drugs and the bad drugs. And of course, the worst case scenario from an overdose of any substance would be that fatality. And the reality is again, when it's only connected to opiate use, we forget that a person can drink alcohol in excess one time, and that can result in a fatality, right? They can harm themselves, they can harm them others, they can get behind the wheel of a car, a motor vehicle, and a fatal accident can happen as a result of one use of excessive alcohol. It can happen with cocaine. It can happen with the benzodiazepine. So any medication and or drug, street drug, narcotic can result in an overdose and then a fatality from only one use. As controversial as it is, marijuana also falls into that category. It doesn't happen as often. We may not hear about those stories, but I know somebody whose life was ended as a result of specifically only being under the influence of marijuana. Not trying to join that argument or if it's legal, it should be legal. That's not what this is about. I'm just simply stating that we classify these substances, and society has helped make it as though one drug is better than another drug. In relation to the marijuana argument, people will say, well, it's legal in however many states it's legal. I happen to live in Indiana and it's not legal in Indiana. But in many states, you can go to your doctor and you can get a prescription for, marijuana, right? And so people say it's legal, it's legal. Well, opium used to be prescribed. Heroin used to be prescribed. And many of the other medications of back in the day have been removed from the market because they found out the addictive properties. They find out, the effect, the harmful effects. So again, not joining that argument or taking either side on it. I'm just stating that even with a prescribed medication, what a doctor, a scientist, a pastor, a preacher, a judge, no one has the ability to do is to stop that medication or that substance from interacting with the brain in a way and causing some type of change in the normal biological functioning and in many cases preventing the impairment. Right. That's why when you go to the doctor and you get this medication, it says don't operate heavy machinery, may cause drowsiness, blurriness, and so on and so forth, because they can't stop the effects on the brain and the body. So society has placed opiates way up here. And again, that seems to be the substance these days that really is taking a lot of lives, unfortunately. But society placed opiate and maybe methamphetamines up here, places marijuana down here. For alcoholics, many people who attempt to or stop drinking, those who may not understand what it means to have an addiction, many people will then say things like, well, you stop drinking? You mean you don't even drink beer? Because again, we've placed whiskey up here and we've placed beer down here. We've placed wine in the middle somewhere. And the reality is the same effect that's produced by a shot of whiskey can be produced by a can of beer. And so I don't want to just talk about overdose as it relates without mentioning that the overdoses do take place with other substances. But the most common one that's current is is connected to the use of fentanyl and heroin. And so with that, there's some things that we can do that can be done. The most important, I think, is to continue to be educated on addiction, continuing to be educated on the effects of these substances. That's the most important thing I think I can do when it comes to helping myself if I'm a person struggling with an addiction or substance use, or if I'm trying to help and better understand a loved one. And so when I got my start in recovery, I was introduced to the disease model of addiction. And with the disease model of addiction, the focus is on abstinence. The solution or the goal is for abstinence, refraining from the use of any substance so that I no longer have to be a victim of the consequences of those substances, and I get to get away from the symptoms that are associated, such as lying, cheating, stealing, manipulation, and all those other things. And so I was introduced to this abstinence-based model where there's no more drugs, there's no more drinking, not even beer, not even weed. All of these things were taken off the table for me. And I thought that was the way it had to be done for everyone else. I thought that if you weren't abstaining from all substances, then you were doing the recovery process wrong. And in time, I was open to receive new information and new perspective and new ideas about, again, addiction and recovery. And the reality as I understand it today, or my current level of understanding says, well, everybody may not be able to just abstain in the fashion that I was able to. There are some people who haven't reached the spot in their life where they see their drug addiction as a problem they're willing to remove from their life yet. And so when it comes to overdose, there's some things that can be used. There's information and resources that can help prevent an overdose. Is it 100% foolproof plan? I don't know. I won't say that it is, but there's some things that can be done that can help minimize the risks, right? For the people who are still going to use and who aren't at a spot where they're willing or able to discontinue the use of substances. And so I was introduced to what's known as the harm reduction model. And I got to see that, and it's basically, self-explanatory in a sense. It's based on its name. It reduces the harmful effects of using the substances and the lifestyle associated with it, right? So when we look at, we'll just say the IV drug users, and we connect that to the harm reduction model. The harm reduction model understands that in many cases, a person who uses drugs intravenously will probably share needles with somebody else. And so harm reduction says, well, let's make it so that clean needles or new needles are available to these people to cut back maybe HIV transmission, to cut back on transmission of hepatitis C, right? So it helps me not have to share a needle and share an infection with somebody that I may be getting high with. But it also, even if I was only using the substance by myself, it helps it so that I'm not putting this dirty needle into my body, and I'm minimizing the risk of the dangers from doing that, right? So that's one thing that can be done. When it comes to the world of drug use and drug addiction, there's a lot of unprotected sex that goes on. And again, the harm reduction model says we understand that this sex is going to happen and it's going to be unprotected in a lot of cases. Well, we'll do something like make condoms and other contraceptive tools available so that we can, again, minimize the risk. Harm reduction. Other things that might be done is, making certain resources available like shelter and housing and different things to, again, cut back the risks and the consequences associated with the drug use. And so overdose, if I am applying some of the things that harm reduction talks about, I may be able to minimize my risks of an overdose, right? And if not able to minimize the risk of the overdose, I may be able to place myself in a position where if that overdose occurs, I still have a better chance of living through it than not. Right. So they talk about doing things like, if I'm still in a position where I'm getting high and I'm using drugs that are, especially the more common ones connected to an overdose, then I probably shouldn't use by myself. I should have that, in as far back as kindergarten, I can remember walking down the line and having a line buddy, right? And so that idea, that concept has been taken into the harm reduction model, where one thing I can do to help prevent or minimize the risks of an overdose or the consequences of an overdose is I can have that buddy system in place where I'm not getting high by myself. And if I have that buddy with me and I begin to exhibit the symptoms of an overdose, then that buddy of mine may be able to, hopefully, because another thing associated with harm reduction is Narcan, right? For the opiate use, the overdose, it reverses the effects. So Narcan is being distributed also with the clean needles and the condoms and the other things, right? So if I'm getting high with that buddy, and that buddy begins to witness me experience these symptoms or these signs of an overdose, then they might be able to quickly administer this Narcan and help save my life. They may be able to call 911 and get the proper authorities to come and provide that medical care that I need. Some of the newer things that are out there are, I can't think of the name. Put it in the chat if you know exactly what they're called. I don't know if but it's basically like the test strips to test to see if there's fentanyl in the substance that you're using, right? And fentanyl seems to be the thing that's causing more of the overdoses these days. It's not the only thing, but it is the thing that contributes to a lot of them nowadays. So there's these test strips that allow me to test whatever substance I'm using to see if there's fentanyl in it or not. So that's another resource. That's another thing that I can do connected to the harm reduction model that, one, may help me prevent an overdose, and two, may help me, in case of an overdose, have a better chance at surviving it. In the perfect world, I and many others would probably say, man, all you got to do is don't use the drugs. If you don't use the drugs, you don't have to worry about overdosing. But again, if I'm speaking from that place, then I would advise myself and anyone else to truly take a good look, be willing to let go of any firm beliefs I have about drug use and addiction. I have to be willing to let go of any ideas and any beliefs I already have about it, and be open to receiving the information from either a person who's lived with addiction or any of the information that's out there, or Google, the library, wherever it is I can get this information, my local healthcare provider. But I think I have to be willing to disregard or discard any firm, solid, concrete beliefs, and I have to be willing to understand and receive the information that truly explains what addiction is about. And so if I'm able to do that, then I'm probably not saying, well, if a person doesn't want to overdose, they should just not pick up the drugs. Because though that sounds good and though that might be true, that's not an option when we're talking about a drug addiction. When I'm dependent on a substance to be able to show up and just be a part of life, it's difficult to just say, you know what, I don't want to overdose. I'm just not going to use the drug today. And so, again, overdose is that thing that takes place not just with a certain class of drugs or substances, but it is more common. And so, some of the things that we have an article written that was posted a couple weeks ago, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of the symptoms of an overdose or the signs of an overdose or the things that can happen after an overdose has happened. I will link that article in the chat, and I would ask you to please go and check that out, especially if you're one of the people who says, if they don't want to overdose, they should just not use the drugs. So there is more information there. But I'll go ahead and talk about one story that I know that's also common. Two things that I'll know that I'll speak on that I believe are common. And to show, one is to show, again, just how strong or how tight the grips of addiction can have on a person. And the other is just more of an informational piece to help a person not have to die when they don't have to. So one thing that happens in a lot of cases, right? So a person overdoses, whatever the circumstance or the environment in which this happens, is irrelevant, but the person overdoses and they get medical attention. So the EMTs come, they get a ride to the hospital in an ambulance, and they've been administered Narcan, so they go into immediate withdrawals, and they begin to experience the effects of the withdrawals. And a lot of times, that person may wake up in a hospital room, and they might have an IV for, some fluids, and they might have, all the tubes and everything connected to them. And they wake up in the hospital room, not really knowing how they got there. Whoever called the ambulance for them knows, man, my loved one, my friend, my get high buddy almost died, or they did die. And thankfully, I was able to act quick enough, and we were able to respond, and this person was able to get this medical attention, and they didn't have to stay dead. But this person, unknown, not knowing of any of that, they know I woke up in a hospital room connected to tubes and wires. Some cases there's handcuffs, but in many cases there's not. But they wake up and they're they see that the surroundings. I'm sitting in a hospital room and I'm all connected. And a lot of times these people yank the tubes out, they yank everything off of them, and they try to get out, and they get out of the hospital. And the first thing they think of is, oh man, I know I had some drugs still left where I came from. Or I see this $20 in my pocket, I need to go and get some more drugs, right? So when we talk about the importance of understanding addiction, this person just died. And the very first thing when they come to, the very first thing that's on their mind is going to resume the very thing that just took their life, right? So it's not about just this idea of, if you don't want to overdose, just don't do the drugs. No, my whole life, everything I'm doing in life is telling me this is the thing I do. This is where I go. When I experience this bad thing that's taking place, and I'm sitting in this hospital and don't understand, the only thing that'll give me some peace of mind and comfort in this moment is going back to the thing that landed me here. So that's common. The other common one, which I hope doesn't occur as much today as it did maybe 3 to 5 years ago, is you got these people in whatever the environment is, and they're getting high. And one person overdoses, right? And out of fear, the other individuals or group of individuals that were in that, in the vicinity, they leave that person alone. Out of the fear of, oh man, if we call the police or the ambulance, then they'll arrest all of us because we're sitting here getting high. I got warrants and I don't want to be involved. And so that's a common one where that's another one where I know people who maybe could have had a chance to live another day, had the fear of the police arresting them been taken off the table. And so many police stations now, and again, this I would encourage anybody to look into your local, your what's going on in your local area. But I know in my local area, calling and saving somebody's life who's overdosing will not result in that person going to jail. What it may do is result in that person having a better opportunity of access to treatment. The police and the first responders in my area now carry Narcan, because it's no longer the idea that let the junkie do what the junkie does and let them die because they should just stop using drugs. It's no, what can we do as a society to help those people who seem to be in their grips of addiction? And if you ask those people, do they want to die? I'm pretty sure many of them will tell you they don't. And so let's be decent humans and help our other fellow humans have an opportunity to live. And so changes have taken place where those people would have a better chance of being able to access treatment, and they just don't have to die. And so, overdose is that thing. Again, unfortunate reality is it's common today. Somebody sitting in this live live session may have overdosed, and they may have picked up from that overdose and went on and continued the use of the substance. So for anybody who believes that a person should just have the willpower to not do the drugs, again, I would highly encourage you to go and seek some more information about drug addiction and drug use and the effects. And anybody who's struggling currently and is at a point where you're willing and ready and want to break free from the grips of addiction, I would encourage you to reach out to Never Alone and let us see how we can help you and break free. Because at the end of the day, that is we're all about. We want you to know, one, that you never have to go through the recovery process alone, right? You're never alone. But two, if you don't know what needs to be done or how to break free, reach out and let us help you. And so I think that's it for me today. I do notice my signs falling back there, so forgive me. I moved to a different location, and things happen. But yeah, so I think that's it for me for the day. I'll say, if anybody has any questions or anything, I can scroll through the chat to see if there are any questions, and I can try to answer those. If not, I would encourage everybody to, again, just seek that information. The best thing I can do when it comes to any area of my life is be willing to admit that I don't know all the answers, or I don't have all the answers, and there's somebody out there with better information or more information than I do. And if I'm willing and able to receive that information, then I can be better informed and better equipped to help myself and help others. So let's see. Don't see any questions. So I thank everybody for tuning in with us. And like I say, we'll do this thing every Monday around this time at the same time, 1 p.m. Central Time. And I hope to see you there. Thanks for allowing me to share.